Welcome back to YouTube.com. About a month ago, I posted a poll on both my channel and my Twitter asking people to submit their top 10 Japanese albums of all time. And I took all the responses I got to that poll, manually tallied them up because I sent the Google form out in the stupidest way possible, and now I've got a list for you of your top 10 Japanese albums ever. Now, real quick before we start, I did limit this list to one album per artist. There were two that would have made the list twice, and I'll tell you what they were when we get there. For those, I just tossed out the second album and then moved everything else up one spot. Anyways, our first album, number 10 on the list, is Happy Bivouac by The Pillows. It's an iconic J-rock record from 1999 that most people these days probably find from Fooly Cooly, which is an equally great anime that they did the soundtrack to. They went on a crazy run from Please Mr. Lost Man through to this album, but Happy Bivouac is probably the best one. It's my personal favorite one, and it's the one that got the most votes. So it's here. At number 9, Itekoma Hits by Otoboke Beaver. I actually didn't expect this one to make it on here, but I guess it does make sense. Thanks, Fantano. Itekoma Hits is a super energetic punk record, which is something that I am always down for. Like with a lot of hardcore, most of the songs are pretty short, only around 2 minutes in length, but they're surprisingly varied, which means it's a very fun and also a very chaotic listening experience. This is both the newest album on the list and also a bit of a teaser for the rest of it, because I found out that y'all really like loud rock music. For number 8, it's渦になるby Kinoko teikoku. This is one of the artists that had two. In fact, the album that placed directly below this, so it would have been number 9, was their very next album, Eureka. Both of these albums are great. I personally like Eureka a little more, but I'm not going to complain about either of them being here.渦になるis kind of a indie rock and a shoegaze album. It's got really good shoegaze tracks like Whirlpool, but then also more spacious indie stuff like Girl Meets Number Girl. Speaking of Number Girl,渦になるis about 20 spots higher than the best Number Girl album on the list. Number 7 is an album that was actually number 1 for a while early in the voting before falling down a bunch to number 7, Tsumanne by Shinsei Kamattechan. This is one pick that I think is very indicative of my audience. Y'all are really online and you like loud rock music, and we got both of those represented by Tsumanne. Personally, my favorite Shinsei Kamattechan album is Tanoshine, but that only got 1 vote, so I guess it's just me. Tsumanne's still great though. It's an iconic J-rock album and one that is definitely a classic in certain circles. I know a lot of people who cite it as their favorite or one of their favorite albums of all time, and in accordance with that, every single person who voted for this put it in their top 4. Number 6, it's Sheena Ringo's Shoso Strip. This is the other artist that would have gotten 2 albums on the list. Kalksamen Kuri no Hana finished right between Tsumanne and渦になる. Shoso Strip is one of those albums where when you listen to it, you can really hear the influence that it's had over so many things that have come later. It has a very noisy style of J-rock, and it's still really fun and fresh today. It's an album that kinda needed to make this list, otherwise the whole thing would have been invalidated. Into the top 5 now. At number 5 is World Is Yours by Massive the Fermenting Dregs. I personally love this album. I gained a whole new appreciation for this band after seeing them live last year. It was so good. I drove like 4 hours one way for that show. I regret nothing. Songs like Kakui Mono are good on record, but they have such a powerful energy live. If you're in America, go to one of their shows this year. It's great. Their self-titled album also got a good amount of votes here, and that one's sick too. Both albums are great, and either one could have made the list and I would have been happy. Following that up, at number 4 is Long Season by fishmans. Pretty sure this is the first pop album on the list. I mean, you could maybe make the case that it's Shoso Strip, but I'd say that's more J-rock. In my opinion, this is the least surprising album here. I mean, this is the number 1 Japanese album on like every music rating site. It's there for a reason. It's a very easy listen, and it's one that appeals to a really wide variety of music fans. You can play it pretty much endlessly and still get lost in it, and it's a record that never gets old. And the fact that it is just one long composition means it's really satisfying to hear everything circle back around in the end. And this is another one that I think really needed to be on this list. And in a similar vein to that one, at number 3 is Solid State Survivor by Yellow Magic Orchestra. This is another classic, not just of Japanese music, but of pop music in general. It definitely deserves a spot in the top 3. This album was so innovative at the time, and the fact that it still holds up so well 45 years later, despite everything that's happened in electronic music since then, is a real testament to how good this thing is. If you include every member of YMO, I think these guys had like 10 different albums receive votes. Y'all love them. At number 2, Ging BOYZ' You and I World War III Love Revolution, or as a lot of people entered it, Young, Alive, in Love. There were about 4 different ways this title got entered. This is a very, very loud and chaotic punk record. It's also a pretty unique record. There's really not a lot like this. It's 75 minutes of some of the craziest, yet also best music I've ever heard. I will admit, this ranking is biased on 2 levels. 1, I love this album, and I know people who filled out the poll that also love this album, so a pretty clear selection bias on this one. And 2, a Ging Boys podcast retweeted the link to my poll and told everyone to go vote for Ging Boys, which I would be a little more mad about, but 1, this was in the top 5 even before that happened, and 2, it's a good podcast. This was also the only album from my personal list that ended up making the top 10. It was number 8 on mine. Now, real quick, before number 1, I want to shout out 3 honorable mentions that got really close to the list, because it was really tight for the last 2 spots. At number 11 was Haru Nomuri's Haru Toshura. Number 12 was My Dead Girlfriend's Hades, The 9 Stages of Change at the Deceased Remains. And number 13 was Ichiko Alba's Windswept at Dawn. Now, at number 1, what y'all voted as the best Japanese album of all time, by a landslide, was Midori's Aritame Mashite Hajime Mashite Midori Desu. And I have to censor that album cover or else the YouTube algorithm will hate this video. This really says a lot about my audience, not just that this made it to number 1, but the fact that it was not particularly close either. Y'all love your loud rock music, and we got a super chaotic punk record at number 1. Just like the Ging Boys record at number 2, it's one that I feel is pretty unique and really cool. Like, take Yukiko-san specifically, which is the second track on this. If I ever did a list like this for the best Japanese songs of all time, that would probably be a contender for number 1 there. This is definitely a fun number 1. It's not one I was expecting, but it's one that I think's pretty cool that it got there. So there's y'all's list. If you're someone who can get responses on a poll and you ran this, I bet you'd get pretty different results. But what we've learned today is that the people who watch this channel overwhelmingly like punk, hardcore, noise pop, shoegaze, all that stuff. Also, congratulations to this person who submitted the closest ballot to the actual list. You got 5 albums correct. I didn't ask for names, but I actually know who this is because she sent it to me on Twitter. I have no prize for you, but congrats. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, I really appreciate everyone who took the time to fill out this poll because this video literally would not have happened without you. Please like, comment, sub. I love y'all so much. Bye.